Hello and welcome to another Cloud City FFTCG tournament match. This is round 1 happening at the Magic Stronghold's weekly tournament. On the left side we have Greg playing his usual mono fire, and on the right side we have Alex playing mono ice, which is a very popular and powerful color in the current meta. Now, I was asked to point out that Greg forgot his playmat, which is why he's rocking the ever so cool Vanguard playmat for today, but no big deal. We're gonna get the game started, and we have Alex going first, discarding a 2CP backup for a Scholar, a very ideal opening for Ice player, so he can follow up with a Sid play next turn. Now, for Fire versus Ice, the Fire player generally wants to play a little bit faster because in the long game, Fire doesn't really have a ton of value plays that will allow them to trade effectively. So he's probably going to go on the aggression here, pitching 2 to play a Light Cloud and pitching another card to play the Sage backup, giving Cloud haste and going in for 1 damage. Crucially for Greg, the damage is actually a Genesis, the best card for Alex to answer this type of high cost forward aggression. If he played a Genesis to freeze the Cloud, he can actually have the option to play a lock for no discard value to threaten 2 discards next turn if Greg doesn't play another forward. But it doesn't look like he has a Genesis, so he plays the Gestallion Empire Sid to search for a probably going to be a Setzer to threaten a Setzer lock play the following turn. Another good search here, if you want to curb the aggression of the Fire player a little bit, is to search for a Celeste and freeze the backup. So next turn they can't follow up on the aggression with a 3 CP forward or backup. We see Alex not passing turns, so likely has something else up his sleeve. Discards 2 to play. Okay, he has the Celeste in his hand, freezes the Sage, and next turn Greg cannot play any 3 CP card effectively. So we'll see if he's willing to overpay for a Lebro or another forward. If a Salmon comes down now, it's actually going to apply a ton of pressure. But he just swings in with the Cloud. And Alex doesn't block in fear of a Belias. A Belias here would definitely swing the game heavily in Greg's favor. So it's just better to take 1 damage instead of trading a Celeste and allowing Greg to draw a card. Greg is thinking. He's thinking he wants to play something else. And it doesn't look like he just passes turn, likely because in his hand he has some odd cost cards that he wants to wait for the next turn to play. So now Alex has the option to go for a Setzer into a lock play by dumping his entire hand. Now the reason why this play is probably the best for this turn is because there's no other way for him to play efficiently, because he only has 2 CP. So either way, he's going to have to pitch 2 for Setzer, and either way, he's going to have to pitch 1 for lock. So we do see him go for the Setzer play. The other option that Alex has is if he taps 2 to play another 2 CP backup, which is what you would do if you wanted to play a little bit slower. But looks like he either doesn't have a 2 CP backup or he wants to mash the aggression of Greg. So he pulls down a Setzer and most likely going to see the lock drop here. The only reason why you wouldn't play lock here is if the other card in your hand is Orphan and you want to pressure an Orphan next turn. But it's very risky to play Orphan next turn because if Greg responds with a Bahamut on one of his forwards, you actually go down to only 4 ice characters including Orphan, and he doesn't get the freeze. So we do see the lock come down, pitching a card out of Greg's hand, and Alex will go ahead and pass turn. Now, this puts Greg in a very difficult position because if he attacks with Cloud, Alex has the option to block with Setzer and freeze him for 2 turns, shutting down any further aggression from Cloud and his very potent special ability. Now we see Greg discarding an Evoker for Lebro here, which I don't know if it's the best play because Cloud doesn't immediately benefit from the Lebro. So unless Greg wants to pitch 2 to play a 4 CP forward like a Sabin, this Lebro is actually not doing him any favors. It would have been a little bit better, in my opinion, to just play the Evoker. He attacks and Alex doesn't block with the Setzer, which is very interesting. I'm curious to see what play he has to follow up, but blocking with the Setzer would have threatened both a Celeste and a lock swing next turn. But either way, we see Greg paying 2 CP to play the Ifrit and then discarding Ifrit to make it 10,000 damage to kill the Celeste. So now Alex doesn't have a card to discard, which means Greg is actually not super pressured to block the lock attack. And because Ice has Mateus the Corrupt, it's very risky for him to block with Cloud because he might lose a forward for free. But either way, I think Alex would go ahead and swing with the Setzer here, because if Cloud blocks, it's a win-win situation for him. If Cloud blocks, Setzer is going to dull and freeze the Cloud, and then Lock gets an attack in. Not to mention, if he doesn't freeze the Cloud and he has a Sid Reigns in hand, he can actually follow up with Sid Reigns and kill the Cloud because he already took 7,000 combat damage from the Setzer. It's a very handy combo for any Ice player to attack with Setzer. He gets a Belias off the damage, and now he has to block the lock unless he wants to lose the card in hand. But that lock attack is quite telegraphed. It's pretty obvious that Alex has Mateus, because if he attacks with a lock and he doesn't have Mateus, that would just be the worst play of the century. So with 2 cards in hand, three cards in hand, Greg draws into a Emperor Zande, or maybe he had it off the Belias draw. He plays the Zande, but unfortunately having only 1 forward against Ice is just not the greatest position. There's so many things that Alex can do, and he drops a Vayne. Probably the last card that Greg wants to see right now. He swings with the Setzer first, gets a Belias off the damage, but then Lock is going to strip that card out of his hand anyways. Swinging in with Setzer puts Greg in a really difficult position, because if he does EX Burst into a Brynhildr, he will be pressured into killing the Lock to save himself from 1 more damage, which then leaves Setzer alive for another turn for another attack. So swinging with Setzer first definitely is the right play. You usually want to swing with the forward that you want to protect. And he goes ahead and plays the Sabin. Sabin is actually probably the best top deck that Greg could have had, because if Sabin goes unanswered this turn, that is to say, Alex doesn't have a Genesis or a Glacia or an Orphan to dull and freeze the Sabin, Greg has a comeback condition. If he top decks a Sabin special, he can nuke in the entire board of Alex's side and free up his Zande because Vayne will be dead. So that's actually, I think, the only way Greg is going to be able to come back from this game. There's just way too much pressure coming from Alex's side. And we see Alex thinking here. He's not immediately tapping to make a play, which means that he most likely doesn't have a Glacia in hand as of this moment, or an Orphan or a Genesis. Even Light Terra could seal the deal, but he doesn't have it. So he goes ahead and swings in with Setzer. Definitely not going to block that because he doesn't want Sabin to be dull and frozen. And if he doesn't attack with Lock here, that means he doesn't have Mateus as well, because that's just a very straightforward play. So it doesn't look like he has Mateus. He's going to go ahead and tap 2 for a backup. Now, the reason why he did that is because if Greg does top deck into Sabin special, at least he's up 1 backup to deal with the one-sided board wipe. So it's a very, very intelligent play from Alex to set himself up just in case a comeback happens. Now we see Greg thinking here. So clearly he didn't top deck into the Sabin special, or else he would have done it already. So he's thinking about what he wants to do. If he plays anything other than a forward this turn, a Glacia or Genesis will give Alex lethal next turn. So I think he's just thinking about whether or not he wants to play whatever is in his hand. Now I didn't see what he drew. If it is a forward, he's basically pressured into playing it right away. But he passes turn, and he just has to pray that Alex doesn't top deck into some sort of way to dull the Sabin, which in Ice is very, very easy. There's Orphan, there's Glacia, there's Shiva if he runs it, and there's Genesis, and even a Light Terra to search for any of those summons would be fine. He taps 2, discards 1, no, not yet, discards 1, and it is a Light Terra, so that will be game. He will search for the Glacia. Barring an EX Burst, that will be game. Sorry, I should always remember that there is a potential for EX Burst in this game. So searches for the Glacia, most likely going to dull and freeze the Sabin. He could also get really greedy and go for the dull and discard, but I think in this case dull and freeze would guarantee the win, because then Greg doesn't even have the option to top deck a Sabin special if an EX Burst does save him. Yeah, he goes and dulls and freezes the Sabin. There's basically no way for Greg to come back. He swings in with the Lock, gets the first damage and the discard. Setzer will go ahead and swing for the 6 damage and no EX Burst, so that will be game. Fire just could not keep up with the FF6 package.